Hey everyone, first of all, I just wanted to say Happy New Year and sorry about the short hiatus. I just wanted to take a little break from making videos for a bit, but now that all of that is over, I am back and ready to continue making Genshin lore videos in the new year. So for our very first video of the new year, I'll be talking about something I've wanted to cover for a while, which is Cyno. And fun fact for all of you guys out there, Cyno was one of the characters that actually got me interested in Genshin Impact. After seeing him in the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, I became a fan, and now here we are with the lore channel and everything. Because of this, today I wanted to dive in and talk about Cyno and some of the lore and theories surrounding this character, given the limited information we have on him. So let's just get right into it. Unfortunately, in terms of in-game lore, we pretty much have no information on Cyno. Generally speaking, the closest we get to learning anything about Cyno comes from the Sumeru Scholar NPCs, and even then they only tell us about the structure of the academia in a very broad sense. To get a better sense of who Cyno is and the lore behind him, we need to reference the Genshin Impact Manga. As per usual in my videos, I'm gonna summarize the story contained within the manga. However, this time I'll only be going over the parts that are relevant to Cyno, as there's a ton of things that occur in the story. Also, I just want to add that if you haven't read the manga, I highly recommend you do so, as it actually has some crazy lore reveals, especially when it comes to Celestia, the gods, and the Fatui. In the manga, we follow a character named Collei as she embarks on a journey in Teyvat. In the story, we learn that Collei was born with some sort of disease. Because of this, she was considered by many to be unclean and undesirable. In an effort to help her, Collei's parents took her to a seer named Barnabas. According to the seer, Collei was touched by a Div, which is a supernatural demonic entity. Barnabas then tells her parents that they must give their daughter to him to save her. However, instead of helping Collei, it's later revealed that Barnabas is working with the Fatui harbinger Dottore. As a part of Dottore's experiments, Collei was injected with a substance known as the Archon residue. Now, it's never clearly stated what the Archon residue actually is, but it appears to be the leftover will and wrath of a dead god. It's best to think of it as something similar to the Tatarigami. The Archon residue has the ability to possess its user and force them into doing things they otherwise would not want to. Another interesting property of the Archon residue is that it resonates with the user's emotions, especially negative ones like hatred, sadness, and anger. Due to her status as an undesirable, Collei is treated horribly by the people around her. Because of her treatment at the hands of others, Collei harbors a deep resentment of society and the gods for the injustices she's had to face throughout her life. Ultimately, these negative emotions only serve as fuel to the fire for the Archon residue, forcing Collei into expending much of her time and energy into fighting against the dark whispers of the god contained within the residue. Anyways, at some point she breaks out of the Fatui facility or is released by the Fatui into the public. Eventually Collei made it to Mondstadt but was denied entry due to her disease. This causes her to lose control and the Archon residue takes over, summoning a giant fiery serpent that destroys a Fatui carriage, killing the diplomats inside. With the Knights of Favonius distracted by the serpent, Collei sneaks into Mondstadt. After wandering around the city, Collei runs into Amber, who offers to help her find a cure for her condition. Amber takes Collei to see Jean and Lisa, who also offer to help Collei. During their investigation, Collei uncovers a document that could potentially help cure her. Unfortunately, the document was written in an ancient language that even Lisa couldn't read, so she sends a letter to the Sumeru Academia requesting for help. In response, the Sumeru Academia sends Cyno to assist with helping Collei. Upon meeting with Collei and Amber, Cyno explains that the Archon residue cannot be cured, but only sealed away. He offers to perform the ritual at Star Snatch Cliff the following day. Amber is hesitant with this solution, but Collei interjects saying that she is willing to try anything to rid herself of her curse. The next day, Collei goes to Star Snatch Cliff, and Cyno begins the sealing ritual. During the ritual, Cyno uses some sort of invocation involving an ancient language to seal away the Archon residue. Additionally, it appears that he utilizes magic as opposed to a vision to seal away the Archon's energy. In any case, the ritual is successfully completed and the Archon residue is sealed away. However, there is a caveat to this. According to Cyno, if the Archon residue is ever released or is awakened, it will completely consume Collei's consciousness. With the ritual completed, Cyno returns to Mondstadt to report his findings to the Knights of Favonius. After this, a bunch of crazy stuff happens, and Amber and Collei return to Mondstadt after all of that gets resolved. However, upon returning back to Mondstadt, Collei makes the decision to join Cyno in returning to Sumeru to learn more about the world. Okay, so with that summary out of the way, it's time to break down what we learn about Cyno within the manga. Now, before we really get into the specifics, I do want to touch on a common misconception surrounding Cyno. In the English translation of the manga, Lisa says that she's going to send a request to her teacher at the Sumeru Academia. After sending the letter, Cyno arrives in Mondstadt saying he's from the Academia. A lot of people, myself included, interpreted this as Cyno literally being Lisa's teacher from Sumeru. However, this is simply not correct. In the Chinese and Japanese translations, Cyno actually says that he's a messenger from Sumeru and that his master sent him to help Lisa. This is a totally different message than what we get in the English translation, and it could be due to the fact that MiHoYo wanted to simplify the dialogue or something like that. Either way, the original message was quite literally lost in translation. In any case, if you think about it though, it makes sense because Lisa is stated to have been the most talented witch to have studied at the Academia in the past 200 years, and I don't know about y'all, but Cyno definitely doesn't look like he's 200 years old. If anything, he's probably younger than Lisa. That being said, I believe that the sages at the Sumeru Academia are extremely old, and it's very likely their prolonged lives are due to the research done at the Academia. But that could be a whole video in and of itself, so we're not going to get into it in this specific video. Anyways, when we see Cyno in the manga as well as in the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, something that really stood out to me was his design. In the manga, we get a pretty good view of Cyno's clothes, and it's clear that the inspiration for his outfit was the Egyptian god Anubis. Specifically, the black hoodie thing that he wears is styled with jackal ears, which is very reminiscent of Anubis. For those of you who don't know, Anubis was the god of the dead within the Egyptian pantheon. Specifically, he was in charge of mummification, protecting tombs, and guiding the souls of the dead to the afterlife. Aside from his design, at the current moment there aren't a whole lot of connections between Anubis and Cyno, but that could easily change as MiHoYo releases more content regarding Cyno. In the library scene with Amber, Collei, and Cyno, one thing that I noticed was that Cyno seems to be constantly studying or researching. In almost every panel, Cyno was holding a book. Additionally, he kept his conversations extremely short and to the point, almost as if he was short on time. And this aligns with what we learned from Yae Miko about Sumeru. At the end of Inazuma's Archon quest, Yae tells us that Sumeru is obsessed with knowledge and wisdom and that they treat knowledge as a resource. Given this information, it aligns with Cyno's behavior as he's constantly studying and learning. He even conducted research and experiments while he was in Mondstadt helping Lisa. From this, it's pretty clear that the scholars from Sumeru are willing to go to extremes to gain more wisdom and knowledge. And now we get to the exciting part, the sealing ritual for the Archon residue. In preparation for the sealing ritual, Cyno creates some sort of altar or pentacle on the ground. Despite the potential consequences, Collei decides to go ahead with the sealing ritual. In the preceding panel of the manga, Cyno moves forward with the ritual by chanting a spell. Interestingly, the incantations of the spell are written using a runic text that is heavily associated with Khaenri'ah. Obviously, this has significant implications for the lore as it points to the idea that the scholars of Sumeru may be conducting research and studies on the ancient civilization of Khaenri'ah, but more on this later in the video. Now, if you guys didn't know, this runic text corresponds with letters in the English alphabet. Because of this, I was able to translate the spell into English, and this is a phrase that we get, which I will show on the screen right now. Anyways, the translation starts off with a list of several strange words, followed with the phrase, "above my head, the presence of God." But what does all of this mean? To really understand the meaning behind the words here, we have to talk about religion, specifically those of Abrahamic origin. So think of religions like Judaism and Christianity. The first 4 words in the spell may look like gibberish to the average person, but they are actually all Hebrew words used to name God. As you are all probably aware, Judaism and Christianity are monotheistic religions, meaning that they only worship one God. If this is the case, then it seems strange that there are multiple names for God in Hebrew, right? Well, this is because in the Old Testament of the Bible, saying the name of God was seen as something forbidden. Because of this, the Israelites would instead substitute words to reference God so as to not offend him. So just keep this in mind as I go through each name of God within the spell that Cyno uses. The first word stands for Yahweh or Jehovah, which is considered to be the holiest and most sacred name used to refer to God. As I stated earlier, the holy nature of this word meant that many of the Jews or Israelites would generally avoid using this word to refer to God. In the context of the manga, it makes sense that the most holy name for God would be used to initiate the sealing ritual. The second word represents the Hebrew word for Adonai, which can be translated in English to my Lord, Master, or Owner. This is the most common word used to replace Yahweh as a reference to God. However, in certain denominations of Judaism, this word is also considered as holy and is no longer used to refer to God directly. The third word can be directly translated to the phrase, I am that I am, or just I am. If you are familiar with the story of Moses in the Bible, this is a phrase that God uses to introduce himself to Moses at the burning bush. Though it might seem strange to reference God as I am, it's actually a really good way to describe the God of the Bible. Essentially, the phrase I am that I am, or I am, exemplifies God's existence, which is not contingent upon anyone or anything else. In other words, this phrase is used to show that God has always existed and will continue to exist for eternity. Lastly, the fourth and final word roughly translates to Almighty God. This word was specifically known for its magical properties and commonly appeared within magical writings, charms, and talismans. It was also known for its ability to ward off evil spirits and demons. Because of this, this word was commonly invoked during exorcisms. That being said, it's very fitting that this is the last name for God that Cyno invokes during the sealing ritual. So now that we know what the first 4 words of the ritual means, this obviously still doesn't tell us a whole lot about the ritual itself. To really understand what's going on here, we have to take a look at Cyno's incantation as a whole. If you look up the full incantation on Google, you'll see that it's an exact match for a ritual known as the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of information that I could find on the ritual itself. However, I did find that it was first practiced by the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was a secret society that participated in occult and magical practices during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The purpose of the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram was to draw out and banish any impurities from the subject of the ritual. Aside from banishing evil energy and impurities, the ritual is also said to fortify and guard the subject of any negative influences. Similarly, Cyno uses the incantations of the spell to draw out the Archon residue from within Collei. Once the evil energy of the Archon was drawn out, Cyno seals it away, protecting Collei from its dangerous influence. Before we move on from the sealing ritual, there's something I would like to take a note of here. After Cyno completes his incantations, we can see the energy from the Archon residue being drawn out from Collei and into a pyramid structure. Interestingly, this ties back into Cyno's themes relating to ancient Egyptian culture. As you all probably know, the pyramids of Egypt served as the tombs and final resting places for the pharaohs. Similarly, in the manga, the pyramid represents the tomb which Cyno uses to contain the Archon. Additionally, I'd like to note that Cyno performing the ritual also has significance as well. As I stated earlier, it seems like the Egyptian god Anubis was the inspiration behind Cyno's design. Well, Anubis is heavily associated with mummification and leading the souls of the dead to the afterlife. So in a sense, Cyno is essentially performing the burial rites for the Archon residue, which I assume comes from a dead god. Through the ritual itself, Cyno is essentially guiding the Archon to its final resting place, much like how Anubis would prepare the pharaohs for the afterlife. After the ritual was completed successfully, we don't see Cyno again in the manga. However, there is something that we definitely need to take a note of since it will likely impact the story down the line. At the end of the manga, Collei is pretty much free of her curse, and with a new perspective on life, she decides that she wants to go back to Sumeru with Cyno. Her reasoning for this is that she wants to learn as much about the world as possible. We then see a panel with Cyno and Collei traveling together. Though this is pretty much speculation at this point, it seems very likely that Collei will become Cyno's assistant, or at least be connected pretty heavily to him in some way, shape, or form. So when the Traveler and Paimon make it to Sumeru, we will probably see those two together for a majority of the Archon quest. Additionally, completely unrelated to Cyno, but something that caught my attention is that Collei doesn't have a vision. We know that after the incident, she develops a different perspective on life, and usually shifts of this magnitude within a character will produce a vision. So the next time we see her, she probably will have a vision, and it's probably gonna be a dendro vision considering her design is very green and earthy toned. Additionally, since she and Cyno seem like they'll be working pretty closely together, they might be released at the same time. But yeah, that's just me talking out loud at this point. Let me know what your thoughts are on this in the comments section below. With that being said, that is pretty much every lore related thing we know about Cyno at this point. So from here on out, I want to speculate a bit more about what we can expect from Cyno in the future. The first thing that really stood out to me was Cyno's knowledge of Khaenri'ah's script and language. It's clear he has some knowledge on this ancient civilization and that his research at the academia may be closely related to this topic. How much he knows remains to be seen, but from what we see in the manga, I'm pretty confident he might know a thing or two about what happened during the Cataclysm. Another pretty important thing we learn from the manga is that magic can exist outside of visions. I mean, we kind of get a sense of this from Sucrose, Timaeus, and Albedo with their practice of alchemy. But in their cases, their line of work seems to be a bit more scientific than magical in nature. The sealing ritual that Cyno performs seems to tap into powers we haven't seen in the game so far. Could this be related to an unknown element, or is this power related to the gods? Sadly, we don't have a definitive answer at the moment, but my guess is that this magic or power is related to Khaenri'ah. I know some people may be thinking that this is similar to the power that the Abyss Order and Dainsleif are able to manipulate. However, the coloration and the look of the sealing ritual performed by Cyno don't look remotely close to the powers that the Abyss Herald and Dainsleif were able to manipulate. That being said, we'll likely see Cyno use that magic again during the story quest for Sumeru. And this brings us to the final topic of this video, and the one that I see the most people talking about, and that is, what vision does Cyno have? Unfortunately, the manga won't be of any use to us here because he's wearing a cloak that covers 90% of his body in it. However, we have the Teyvat chapter storyline preview, which gives us a better look at Cyno and his possible powers. So if you haven't seen it yet, I'll play a clip of it really quick for you guys.
The god of wisdom's enemy is wisdom itself, and the oasis of knowledge is a mirage in the desert of ignorance. In the city of scholars, there is a push for folly, yet the god of wisdom makes no argument against it.
In the clip we just watched, it shows us that Cyno is a polearm user, however the element of his vision remains pretty ambiguous. And if I'm gonna be honest here, he could be any of the elements, but I'll go through the elements that make the most sense based on what we see in the trailer. So, the first thing I actually noticed when watching the trailer was the red gem on his belt. Obviously, it made me think that he could be a pyro character, however given that there's already 2 pyro characters within the trailer itself, it seems unlikely that this is the case. Additionally, the animations that go along with the characters appear to indicate the element of their vision. In this case, we see a cloud of sand flying past the screen before revealing Cyno, making pyro an unlikely element for him. Because of this, I believe that he is likely to be either Anemo and Geo, and I'll explain my reasoning for this. Geo would make a lot of sense for Cyno given the sand animation during the trailer as well as the golden adornment and accessories on his clothes. Not only would this tie in with his visual design, but it would incorporate the Egyptian elements of his design as well. Seeing as Egypt is in the desert and his design closely resembles that of Anubis, Cyno having a Geovision would perfectly blend his lore and design elements together. That being said, I think there's an argument to be made for him having an Anemo vision. In the trailer, we can see sand being whipped up around him, which instantly made me think of sandstorms. This is a weather phenomena that is common in Egypt and in desert biomes, so Anemo could definitely be a contender here for his vision. But we could also all be wrong and he could have a Dendrovision considering he is from Sumeru. However, I personally don't think this is the case because I can't picture him having a bright green vision based on his current design. Lastly, I also have seen people say that he could be an Electro character, but aside from the color of his outfit, there's really not anything that screams Electro to me when it comes to his lore. But yeah, let me know what you guys think his vision will be down in the comments section below. Personally, I'm hoping for Geo. And yeah, that is it for my video on Cyno. When I first started writing this video, I thought it was going to be a short and quick video, but how foolish of me, because after I started doing research on Cyno, I fell into so many rabbit holes, and next thing I know, my script is like 7 pages. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel and let me know what you think about Cyno down in the comments below. I think he's a pretty cool character and I can't wait till he's in the game. Thank you for stopping by and I'll see you guys next time. Peace!